When the entire room stood up clapping for my sister's success, I smiled like everyone else. What they didn't see was the battle I had fought alone, the life I had built in silence, and the part of me that had learned to expect no applause. My name is Mara Celine, and for as long as I can remember, my sister Viviana has been the shining star of our family. Everyone loved her confidence, her ambition, her dazzling achievements. Honestly, I was proud of her too. But pride has a way of growing heavy when you're constantly standing in someone else's shadow. That night, as we celebrated Viviana's biggest accomplishment yet, I stayed quiet, just like I always had. I never planned to steal her moment. I never even planned to speak. But my daughter Ella had other plans. And when she walked to that stage, everything I had built in silence finally came to light. The banquet hall gleamed under chandeliers that looked like they had been pulled straight out of a fairy tale. Gold and silver balloons floated above clusters of round tables, and the scent of fresh roses filled the air. Laughter echoed off the marble floors. Everywhere I turned, people were dressed in their best. Glittering gowns, sharp suits, faces beaming with pride. Tonight was Viviana's night, and no one would let you forget it. I adjusted the strap of my simple black dress and plastered on my best smile. As much as I loved my sister, it was hard to ignore the sharp edge of loneliness curling inside my chest. I glanced across the room and spotted her surrounded by admirers. A vision in red silk, her dark hair shining under the lights, her laughter loud and confident. She was magnetic, as she had always been. Growing up, Viviana had been the dreamer and the doer. Top of her class, president of every club, the one who left our small town and never looked back. She built her marketing empire from scratch, and tonight she was being honored as Entrepreneur of the Year, the highest recognition the Chamber of Commerce had to offer. Our parents, especially our mother, could hardly contain their pride. I saw her dabbing her eyes with a tissue, murmuring to her friends about how Viviana had been destined for greatness even as a child. And me? I was the one who stayed, the one who chose stability over ambition. I got married young, had my daughter Ella, and when my marriage crumbled, I picked up the pieces and kept going. No glamour, no grand achievements to announce over Christmas dinner. Just a life built quietly around resilience, long work hours, late-night homework sessions with Ella, and dreams that had learned to whisper instead of shout. I didn't resent Viviana. Not really. She deserved the applause. She had worked hard for it. But somewhere along the way, I had started to believe that the sacrifices I made, the ones no one saw, didn't count. That being dependable, being steady, was invisible compared to building empires and winning awards. Ella sat beside me at our table, her small hand resting over mine. She was 17 now, but moments like this reminded me how fiercely protective she still was of me. She didn't miss much. Not the tight smile I wore, not the occasional glances I gave my mother, hoping for a nod of acknowledgement that never came. The MC took the stage, his voice booming through the speakers, announcing Viviana's grand achievements. A slideshow began to play on giant screens around the room, filled with glossy photos of Viviana cutting ribbons at new offices, giving keynote speeches, posing with celebrities. Every photo was a reminder of everything she had built and of everything I hadn't. I tried to keep my focus on the positive. I wanted to be happy. Truly I did. But when a woman at a nearby table leaned toward her companion and said, just loud enough for me to hear, "Poor Mara, some people just aren't meant for the spotlight." My heart gave a painful lurch. I looked down at the napkin in my lap and swallowed hard. Maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't built for the spotlight. Maybe my life was just a collection of small, invisible victories that didn't matter beyond my own four walls. Across the table, Ella stiffened. She heard it too. I gave her hand a squeeze, silently begging her to let it go. It wasn't worth making a scene. I had learned long ago that defending yourself only made you look bitter. Better to smile, to nod, to pretend the comments didn't dig into your skin like thorns. As the applause roared for Viviana's acceptance speech, I forced myself to clap along, to cheer like everyone else. This was her moment. It wasn't about me. It never had been. Still, as I watched her bask in the adoration, a small part of me ached. Not out of jealousy, but out of a quiet yearning to be seen. Just once. Not for being extraordinary, but for enduring. for building something, even if it wasn't wrapped in spotlights and headlines. I didn't know it then, but everything was about to change. I had no idea that my silent sacrifices, the ones I thought had gone unnoticed, were about to be dragged into the light by the one person who had always seen me clearly. My daughter, my fiercest champion, my quiet revolution was about to become anything but quiet, and it all started when Ella stood up from her chair, heart pounding, voice trembling, and walked toward the stage. Ella's chair scraped softly against the floor as she stood. I caught her hand, gripping it lightly, my eyes pleading. She leaned down just enough for me to whisper, "Please, don't." She gave me a small, almost heartbreaking smile. "Trust me, Mom," she said. Then she slipped from my grasp and threaded her way through the sea of tables, heading toward the stage. Panic surged up my spine. My heart hammered. What was she doing? My mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Maybe she would embarrass herself. Maybe she would embarrass me. Maybe she would cause a scene Viviana would never forgive us for. My chest tightened as the MC glanced at Ella. His brow furrowed slightly, but then he smiled and stepped aside, offering her the microphone. The room buzzed with soft confusion. Guests shifted in their seats. My mother turned toward me sharply, an unspoken question flashing in her eyes. What was happening? I wanted to disappear. Ella stood under the lights, looking smaller and younger than usual, but her voice when she spoke was strong and clear. "Good evening," she began. "I know tonight is about celebrating my Aunt Viviana's amazing success, and she deserves every bit of it. But before the night ends, there's someone else you all need to hear about. Someone who's been just as extraordinary even if you didn't see it." A low ripple of murmurs ran through the audience. I could feel every set of eyes swinging between me and Ella. My mouth went dry. My hands trembled slightly under the table. Ella continued, her gaze sweeping the room, her chin lifted with a courage I wasn't sure I could have matched. "You know my mom, Mara Celine, as the one who stayed home, the one who chose a small life, as some of you have said." She paused, letting the words hang heavy in the air. "But what you don't know is that while everyone was chasing dreams under bright lights, my mom was building dreams for others, quietly, relentlessly, without applause." Tears stung my eyes. My stomach twisted into knots. I wanted to run onto that stage and pull her down. I wanted to shield her from the judgment I was sure would follow. But I stayed frozen, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything beyond the thudding in my ears. Ella held up a leather folder, opening it slowly. From where I sat, I recognized the seal embossed on the paper inside. The National Literacy Foundation's crest. A plaque shining under the spotlights gleamed in her hands. "For the past 5 years," she said, her voice breaking just a little, "my mom has been running a nonprofit called Bright Pages. She created it from our tiny kitchen table. She spent sleepless nights writing grants, drove miles to tiny towns no one talks about, and helped over 2,000 children learn to read. Children whose futures were slipping away because no one believed in them. My mom believed." The room was dead silent. You could have heard the drop of a pin. My mother sat stiffly next to me, her mouth slightly open. Viviana stared at Ella, her expression unreadable. Ella pressed forward. "She never told you. She didn't want the spotlight. She didn't ask for thanks, but tonight she deserves it. She deserves it more than anyone else I know." She turned the plaque around, showing it to the entire hall. The engraved words caught the light. "National Impact Award for Literacy Advancement, Munaka Mara Celine." The MC stepped forward again, taking the microphone gently from Ella. His voice was thick with emotion when he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in honoring Mara Celine." The applause began, tentative at first, like people weren't sure if it was allowed. But then it swelled, grew louder, filling the room with something I had never heard directed at me before, pure, genuine admiration. I sat frozen, my hand covering my mouth, as dozens of people stood, applauding, cheering. I looked at Ella. Her eyes found mine across the room. She didn't need to say anything. I understood. I wasn't invisible. Not anymore. But even as the noise rose around me, part of me struggled to breathe through the swirling emotions. Pride, fear, shock. Would Viviana feel betrayed? Would my mother resent that the spotlight had shifted, even just for a moment? I was pulled between two tides, the fierce swell of pride my daughter had handed me, and the fear that claiming this recognition would somehow cost me the fragile acceptance I had clung to my whole life. I didn't know it yet, but that night was about more than applause. It was about finally choosing to believe that what I had built, quietly, fiercely, without permission, was worthy of being seen, and that was just the beginning. For a few moments after the applause washed over me, I just sat there, stunned, afraid that if I stood, I would somehow break the moment, as if this fragile thread of recognition would snap and vanish, and everything would go back to how it had been. I could feel every heartbeat in my chest, every shaky breath. My mother leaned closer and touched my arm. Her hand was warm but hesitant, like she wasn't sure what to say. Her eyes, normally so sharp and watchful, shimmered with something that looked almost like regret. "Mara," she whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "Go." I turned and looked at her, searching for any hint of sarcasm or resentment. But for the first time in a long time, I saw only pride. Real, unguarded pride. Across the room, Ella stood waiting by the stage, clutching the plaque against her chest. She nodded at me, urging me forward. Her cheeks were flushed with emotion, but her eyes were steady and sure. She believed I deserved this moment, and somewhere deep inside, a part of me started to believe it too. I pushed back my chair and stood on legs that trembled slightly. The room seemed to tilt around me. I could feel hundreds of eyes following my every move as I made my way toward the stage. Every step felt like I was shedding years of doubt, one layer at a time. I had spent so long building walls around myself, walls made of modesty, fear, and the belief that my work was only valuable if no one noticed it. Tonight, those walls were crumbling. Tonight, I wasn't just the sister who stayed behind. I wasn't just the single mother who made do. I was something more. When I reached the stage, Ella met me halfway and pressed the plaque into my hands. Her fingers brushed mine, giving a gentle squeeze, grounding me in the moment. I turned to the microphone, blinking against the bright lights that made it hard to see the audience. I hadn't prepared a speech. I hadn't even prepared to be seen. But somehow, the words came. "I don't really know what to say," I began, my voice shaking but growing steadier with each word. "I never did any of this for recognition. I never thought my name would be spoken into a microphone like this. All I ever wanted was to give children a chance, to hand them a key that could open doors they didn't even know existed." I paused, swallowing hard. The room was silent, hanging on to every syllable. I was never the loud one. I didn't build companies or stand on stages. I built hope in small corners of the world where hope felt like a stranger. I built it one child, one story, one late night at a time. I looked down at Ella, who beamed up at me with a pride so fierce it made my throat tighten. "And the truth is," I continued, "I couldn't have done it without my daughter. Ella has been my biggest supporter, my bravest believer. She reminded me tonight that even if you work in silence, even if no one sees you for years, what you build still matters. It matters more than you know." I looked out into the sea of faces. Some were wiping away tears. Others simply nodded, their expressions soft with understanding. "I'm grateful beyond words," I said, "not just for this award, but for the reminder that we all have the power to build something beautiful, even when no one is watching." As I finished, the applause rose again, filling the hall with a warmth that felt different this time. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was real. It was earned. The MC stepped forward to thank me, but before he could say anything, Viviana came up onto the stage. For a split second, fear flashed through me. Was she angry? Upset that her moment had been interrupted? But then she wrapped her arms around me in a fierce hug, a real one. No cameras flashing, no performance, just two sisters, long overdue for understanding. "You're incredible, Mara," she whispered into my ear. I had no idea. Neither did most of them, but now they did. And more importantly, now I did. As we stepped off the stage together, Ella ran up and hugged me tight. My mother met us near the stairs, her face still wet with tears. For the first time in my life, she didn't compare me to Viviana. She just said, "I'm so proud of you, baby girl." And I believed her. In that moment, I realized something. Recognition is beautiful, but the real turning point wasn't in winning applause. It was in finally recognizing myself, my worth, my strength, my story. And that changed everything. As we stepped down from the stage, I could feel the weight of years lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't just the applause fading behind us, it was the quiet, stubborn belief that my life hadn't been enough. It was breaking apart, piece by piece, right there on the polished floor of that banquet hall. Ella's arm stayed looped through mine, grounding me. Viviana walked beside us, silent at first, as the guests returned to their seats. But the energy in the room had changed. The glitz and glamour that had seemed so important just an hour ago suddenly felt hollow compared to the rawness filling the space now. Caught snatches of conversations as we passed. How did we not know? She's been doing this for years. That's real impact. People weren't talking about Viviana's million-dollar deals anymore. They were talking about a mother, a woman, a builder of futures who had asked for nothing and given everything. At our table, my mother stood waiting. She looked smaller than I remembered, smaller and older somehow. But there was a softness in her face I hadn't seen since I was a child. She took my hands in hers, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry, Mara," she said, her lips trembling. "I should have seen you. I should have told you sooner how proud you make me." Tears threatened to spill again, but I held them back, not because I didn't feel them, but because I wanted to savor every second of this moment with clarity. For once, I didn't want to hide behind tears. "I know, Mom," I said softly. "I know." We embraced, and for the first time in decades, it felt like no one was comparing, no one was measuring. It was just love, raw, imperfect, overdue. Viviana cleared her throat, her voice lighter now, but filled with a different kind of respect. "I owe you an apology, too," she said. "All these years, I thought being loud was what made things important. But you've been doing the real work. You built something that actually matters." She wasn't saying it to be polite. She meant it. I could see it in the way she looked at me. Not as the sister who lagged behind, but as the sister who had built a world without asking for applause. For a while, we stood there, just the four of us, in our little circle. The awards, the titles, the expectations, all of it blurred into the background. What remained was the simple, undeniable truth that sometimes the quietest victories are the ones that echo the longest. As the evening wound down, guests came over one by one. Strangers, friends of friends, people who had barely known my name before tonight. They wanted to shake my hand, hear about bright pages, offer support, even volunteer. An older man in a crisp navy suit, a CEO from one of Viviana's partner companies, leaned in and said, "If you ever need funding, Mara, call me. We need more people like you." It was surreal. For so long, I had lived in the shadows, convinced that what I built mattered only to the few kids whose names I learned and faces I never forgot. Now it seemed the world had widened around me. But the greatest moment came later, when Ella and I finally climbed into the car, exhausted and exhilarated. We sat there for a while, the city lights twinkling outside the window, not saying anything, just breathing, letting it all settle. Then Ella turned to me and said, "I didn't do it to make you famous, Mom. I did it because the world deserves to know the kind of woman you are." I reached over and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, my throat tightening again. "The only one who needed to know," I said, "was you." She smiled at me, a slow, beautiful smile that lit up her entire face. "And I always did," she whispered. In that moment, I realized the real victory wasn't the standing ovation or the handshakes or even the awards sitting in my lap. It was this, the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter, built on trust, pride, and fierce, unshakable love. Everything else was just a bonus. As I started the car and pulled into the night, I felt something shift inside me, something powerful and lasting. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing anyone else's version of success. I wasn't shrinking myself to fit into anyone's expectations. I was enough. I had always been enough. And finally, finally, I believed it. The days after the banquet passed in a kind of golden haze, not because life suddenly became glamorous or easy. It didn't. The dishes still piled up in the sink. Bills still came in the mail. Mornings were still a race against the clock, scrambling to get Ella to school and myself to work. But something fundamental had shifted inside me. For the first time, I moved through the world without the invisible weight pressing down on my shoulders. I no longer heard the old whisper that said I hadn't done enough. That whisper was gone, replaced by a quieter, stronger voice inside me, one that said, "You built something real. You made a difference." It wasn't about the award. It wasn't about the applause or the handshakes or the offers of funding. It was about finally recognizing the life I had carved out of all those silent, ordinary moments. 2 weeks after the banquet, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. It was from one of the boys who had gone through the Bright Pages program years earlier. "Dear Miss Mara," it began. The letter's neat, but a little shaky. "Thank you for helping me learn to read when nobody else had time for me. Because of you, I'm graduating high school this year. I'm going to college. I'm going to be a teacher like you." I sat at the kitchen table, tears streaming down my face, the letter clutched in my hands. This was what mattered. This was what I had built in silence. And suddenly, I realized that the quiet paths we walk, the sacrifices we make when nobody is looking, the dreams we nurture in private, they are never wasted. They ripple outward in ways we may never fully see. They matter in ways that awards can't measure. A few weeks later, Viviana invited me out for lunch. We sat across from each other in a sunny little cafe, no crowds, no flashing cameras, just sisters, rebuilding something between us that had been cracked, but not broken. "I've been thinking a lot about that night," she said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "About you, about how much I missed." I didn't interrupt. I let her speak, let her take her time. "I was always so busy chasing the next milestone," she said. "I thought success had to be loud to count. But you built something stronger in the quiet." Her voice broke a little and she laughed self-consciously. "You built something that lasts." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. We didn't need to say much more. We understood each other now in a way we never had before. Ella, too, seemed to stand a little taller these days. She carried herself with a new kind of pride, and not the kind you get from being the daughter of someone important. It was the pride that comes from seeing the truth, that greatness isn't measured in headlines or bank accounts, but in the lives we quietly lift up along the way. I often thought back to that night in the banquet hall, to the moment Ella took the microphone. She could have stayed silent. It would have been easier, safer, but she didn't. She chose to speak. She chose to shine a light into the places I had quietly labored, not to embarrass me, but to honor me. And in doing so, she taught me the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes the ones we think we are protecting are the ones protecting us in ways we can't even see. Now, when I stand in front of new volunteers at Bright Pages, when I speak to donors or read letters from children who finally cracked open their first book, I remember what that night taught me. That quiet doesn't mean small, that invisible doesn't mean insignificant. And that love, poured out over years in unseen ways, is a force bigger than any applause. My life didn't change because the world finally noticed me. My life changed because I finally noticed myself. As I tucked the plaque into a small corner of my living room, surrounded by photographs of Ella, of our road trips, of story times and messy kitchens and simple joys, I realized that my legacy wasn't made of gold or headlines. It was made of laughter, of open books, of stubborn hope, and of a daughter who refused to let her mother's light stay hidden. In the end, it wasn't about proving myself to the world. It was about finally embracing the truth I had been building all along. I had created something beautiful, and I didn't need a stage to know it. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you of someone building something beautiful in silence, I would love for you to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it too. I'd also love to hear your own story. Drop a comment below and tell me. Have you ever felt unseen while working for something that mattered? Your voice matters here. Your journey matters. I read every single comment. And if you want more true stories that remind us of the strength we carry in quiet moments, subscribe to the channel and join our community. We are all building something. And here you are never invisible. Until next time, keep building, keep believing, and remember, even the smallest light shines bright in the dark.